Alright, Pine Springs Paradise. This was no paradise of a deal, let me tell you. Holy shit. I like to use alliteration when I'm describing properties. So we have listings like Cow Creek Cabin, Twin Oaks 20, 2 on 20, or in this case, it was a beautiful parcel nestled at the base of Breckenridge National Forest. Pine Springs Paradise. We originally were the buyer's agent for Mark from Bakersfield. It was a fun one to check out. There was a spring on each end of the property. One just on the property and one just off. The map overlay was difficult to originate where everything was. I can remember Mark hiking up some steep terrain in those slip-on loafers, the comfortable house slipper kind. He was one determined buyer and real cool plans for the property, like a 300-foot zip line. He was sold the property with the knowledge that the well condition was not known. After a few months, Mark realized that the property was perfect for him, but his girls, wife, and daughter weren't into it, so he was looking to sell. In addition, there was an easement issue that came up. The road through Mark's parcel happened to be an easement for the neighbor. I am real careful to check the title report for this sort of thing, as I was lied to when I purchased my own ranch regarding an easement. When Mark told me, I was shocked, and I immediately went to my title report and was shocked to see that the easement in question was not on the report. The listing agent of the adjacent parcel claiming the easement, Carol, was a friend with us, so we went back and forth over it. To be honest, it was extremely stressful as this easement was so hard to plot. A real surveying nightmare. The easement was not listed on the title report. However, it was listed on the title report that Carol had for the adjacent parcel. It was really lucky that at the time everyone on the mountain was using Chicago Title, so the same title company had issued conflicting title reports. I was able to win the argument with a few emails regarding the liability that Chicago Title had to my buyer for non-disclosure of an easement. It was real interesting to see how the title company handled itself when faced with a claim. It is actually rare, however, they were wrong and admitted that it through a folly of emails. They never knew that I had both title reports. I was pleased with the win for me, and I thought it would be a win for Mark. The title company refused to allow me to be part of the settlement, but Mark was only offered a couple thousand, which was totally ridiculous. I was now representing the parcel only now with an easement through the middle of it. The parcel that benefited from the easement was sold with the spring for not nearly enough money, in my opinion. The guy that bought it was a bud grower, a real trashy sort of operation. He had one illegal living in an old RV by the spring, and what came out to be about 1,500 plants. It was a lot. Before he was raided, we of course had the fortunate opportunity to go head-to-head with him. Their camper and operation was right on the property line, so we couldn't help but show their garden when we were showing the parcel, and the easement still wasn't defined, so there was question who actually owned the pad the RV was on. One time we heard a shotgun racket as we were approached. We of course got loud and aggressive, yelling, "We got a gun too." After that, we were sure to make our presence known every time we were showing, for both safety and just a bit of harassment. Even though we grow our own, we do not like commercial growers like this. Shitting in the woods, destroying the land with trash, and just low class living. Those aren't our sort of people. We did have a face-to-face with the owner before he was raided by the sheriff and feds, and we had come to an understanding. Right before he got a visit from law enforcement, we found a buyer for Pine Springs Paradise. We had been shopping with this lady who was a horse collector. She was dirty, nasty, and horrible to be around. It was so hard to show her properties. Hell, this lady would go piss on trees like she was a man. She was so dirty that I wouldn't allow her in the Jeep. And what did she do every showing? Try to jump in the Jeep. It was so frustrating that we were even entertaining the lady as a buyer, that when we worked a deal for her to buy Pine Springs, I thought, thank God, at least all that shopping would help me get this Pine Springs problem over with. While I was vindicated by the Kaido company's mistake, it didn't sit well with me. The big kicker now was that this lady needed the well functioning for a water source for the horses. We opened escrow and got an estimate from the well guy to pipe, pump, and do a water test. The well guy, Rick, is a friend, good guy, and he did me a favor on this one and was able to pull it off for just over $4,000, which is real cheap. The buyer was supposed to meet us the day of the install to pay for the installation. She showed, but didn't have her checkbook. Uh-oh. Rick was cool and said he'd do escrow billing. I should have known this dirty lady was going to be a problem. She didn't even stay for the well work to be completed. The well ended up being just over 300 feet, which was a great producing well with really clean water. Wouldn't you know that very evening, that idiot backed out of the deal, leaving me on the hook for the cost of the well install. Now we were really motivated to sell this paradise. I had a $4,000 pump on my word in this well and no buyer. We instantly put it back on the market and were able to sell it to a prospective couple who was looking for a weekend place to develop. The property happened to be in close proximity to our ranch, and that was, I believe, a selling feature for the buyer. They got a great deal on it and also were able to get owner financing. The seller was motivated as the undisclosed easement was now to a cannabis grow with some unsavory characters. The new buyers were not intimidated by the grower and felt that it was a good place for them to be able to do their own personal gardening. The deal went through, and at the time I had a huge release of stress. For a time. The cannabis grow was then busted right around the same time that we lost our ranch. The new buyers were excited to develop the property and hired a different Cody to do grading for them. He went a little crazy in the grading, went a full 200 feet onto the neighbor's property. We were shocked when we stopped by and looked at the grading. We did get a call from the neighbor just a week or so later. It was so interesting to hear that he was upset about the grading. Also interesting that he was claiming easement through the same road as the grower, and to really put the pressure back on, he was claiming that the well was his, and he wanted to know who put the pump and pipe down the hole. I did, but it wasn't his. Well, we don't know. Okay, it gets better. It was an interesting correspondence back and forth regarding the well. At this point, we were not as concerned about the easement as this new well problem. We originally sold the property with the original association well on it. That well is listed on the original parcel map right in the same location as the well in question. In my mind, that neighbor was just flexing because he was angry about the well. It would have been nice if it was that simple. After a few weeks, the neighbor was able to produce a receipt for a well drill in the same location. The real problem was that the location of the well was right on the property line. On large parcels in our area, there are few real surveyed markers, and this well was a toss-up for which side of the line it was on. The conundrum of the well ownership was then called into major question. We were sold the parcel originally as having a well way back when Mark bought it. In addition, the original association map had the well listed on it right in that location. On the other side, there was a well drilling receipt with permit for a new well in the exact same location. The neighbor was very cordial and it helped with working this all out. After speaking to him, the ace in the hole was that he was interested in selling as well. I eventually, after many days of looking at maps and going over description, determined that the well driller insisted on popping a new hole, just freshened up the old association hole and recased it. Instead of popping a new hole, just recased the old one. The reason I came to this conclusion was the well size was not standard, but smaller than usual. That to me was an indication of what went on, as the well guy also didn't have a clear picture of the property lines. All of this was done many years before and didn't come up until the grading incident. The only way out was to sell both parcels or to hire a surveyor, and at this point we only knew that it was very expensive. It took a couple months to find a buyer, which was really fast for our area. There's been a big increase in the market with everything going on in the world. This parcel had a good producing well now, in addition to new larger double parcel acreage. It increased it to a full 56 acres, which allowed it to stand above the competition. The buyer was interested in the property lines, however, was more focused on the exterior of the parcel. When we did the deal, we agreed that the two owners and myself out of my commission would split the cost of a survey. While I was not happy with the $12,000 that the survey cost, it was real disheartening at the same time, eye-opening how it all unfolded. On the other hand, I wanted to help this buyer any way I could. That 12K quote was actually a deal, and I would use the surveyor again for 2 reasons. First, he was the only person we could find that would commit in a timely manner, and he was the cheapest. Our friend Gary, who bought several parcels in a small lake from us, helped us with a referral of a friend of LA who was a surveyor. The parcel is really fabulous, and I was glad to see the buyer invest in something real, especially with all the BS going on. Not to mention it's breathtaking. The seller, who only paid $15K down, freaked over the cost of the surveyor. I honestly was so stressful to deal with someone acting aggressively whiny over money, complaining about the cost and putting things back on me, such as, why didn't I get a survey when I bought? Of course, our response was that your down payment wouldn't even have covered the cost. It honestly wasn't the extra money I had to eat for the surveyor and the other costs out of my commission. What upset me was the complaining and, of course, this statement. I don't even think we want to sell now that the survey is going to be so much. To threaten both deals over $4K when the seller only had a piece for approximately 6 months. They only put $15K down, made payments, and sold it $120K when they bought for $55,000. So what is that? $65,000 profit? Not sure I do numbers so great after 4 p.m. They made a lot of money to complain over a few thousand to close, and it was so stressful. As I said above, it wasn't all the stress of the deal. It wasn't even the threat of canceling over a few thousand, but more this ungrateful attitude about the whole thing. That was what burned Wendy and I the most. They did use me to roll the money into another place by ours at the river, which made the money aspect cool, but the stress makes real estate worth every penny. This deal was made possible by the panic-induced real estate spike due to COVID conspiracy. Thanks, y'all. However, stuff's crazy now. What's going on in the world, I would be glad to have a ranch. I'd be out of anything out of the city. Whatever, COVID. All right. This next section is a real special one. It's just a whole section of mountain that's up at 7,000 feet. Excuse me, I gotta adjust myself. All right, mountaintop. The craziest cabin I ever listed was on Red Mountain. Also off an off-road adventure to get to, and was just as many switchbacks or even more, just no cliffs. This place we listed was definitely the Cliffhanger Ranch. The house was built on stilts, and when I took the listing over the phone, it sounded cool. When we first arrived, it was really amazing to see 2 rooms built on large decks and about 75 feet on the air on wooden stilts. It was really super exciting to see once we got there, for both relief that we made it, as well as awe in its lofty structure. While climbing the stairs, I was checking out the construction as Wendy was, dealing with a client. It was disturbing to see the entire home had no footings, or at least no traditional ones. The place was built off large boulders off the side of the mountain, so the one side of the deck was 75 feet in the air, and the other side was adjacent to the side of the hill. It was impressive, but I know that it was not built to last. Boulders slide. I mentioned to the seller the footings, and he was aggressive to say he was a roofer, and this place was built by his hands and was solid. It's all unpermitted anyway, so I guess it was just disclosure. The seller did say he only fell off the deck once when he brought up that there are no rails on the edge. Disclose, and that's what we did. The first buyer to look at the Treetop Ranch was Howard, my client, the contractor who looked at the deck, and also the second owner of the Mountaintop Gold Mine. He was also a contractor, and he was actually working in the field, so I was excited for him to check this place out. When we got there, a couple of months had gone by, and the condition was a bit different. It might have been the time of day, because we showed up in the afternoon when the wind was blowing. It was real exciting climbing the stairs and have the entire house move with the wind. It was really cool to see the wood supports grind from the wind on the boulders supporting them. We actually had a hard time getting Howard to go all the way up, and he's a tough guy. That showing ended that listing. I canceled it, and the seller was very offended. I hope he had fire insurance, and do wonder if it fell before it burned, because it went right through there. The wildest deals are on the mountaintop. It is wild in Twin Oaks and Walker Basin, even more so up there on Red Mountain or up Thompson Canyon. But the top of the Paiutes is an entirely different league. You see, we have mountain lion, bear, and I saw me a Bigfoot here in Walker Basin. Well, I actually saw it looking at a real estate photo of Chop's place from the cannabis chapter. It's unfortunate I don't have that picture anymore. On the top of the mountain, we saw an actual footprint. Was it a Bigfoot? Yes. Did it look human? Sure, size 16 plus. Was it found at the top of the mountain in the middle of winter without anyone around and no truck and no other track or on private property? Yes. That was hard to get through. It was one of the toughest deals that I physically did. Well, not anything like the deck reinforcement, but super intense for a couple days. The buyer was an adjacent neighbor, and he negotiated this deal right at the beginning of winter. Winter on the mountain is intense because of the 19 switchbacks. Oh, and that cliff. The 7,000 feet of snow, so it could be a problem too. We actually sold 6 pieces of property one year and had 4 relisted by the next year. Super tough winters. Right after the middle snow, we came to an agreement on the deal. Here's a picture of just so you kind of get what it's like driving up in the snow. That's not the fucking it's fun. It's fun. What a job, right? Off-road for an hour to go up there and try to sell something. Usually don't, but it's fun. We sold this 2.5 acre piece at the top of the mountain. However, the piece had a stipulation that the trailer must be removed and taken off the mountain. The problem was the trailer or the trailers were 1960, super solid and heavy. And to get up the mountain, the 19 switchbacks to go from 3,500 feet to the peak at 7,000. We used our lifted Jeep for business, and this was all business. We had agreed to the deal. On our first trip up the mountain on to this parcel to assess this trailer haul, we brought a local. He was going to access or haul the bigger trailer for some cash, and we were going to do the smaller one with the Jeep. My boys love to come up the mountain with us. They call it indoor. It's a lot like that in some spots with the tall pines. We walked out on this parcel, and it was after the first snow. There was no one on the mountain, no tracks anywhere around. You could see cars. Can't get up there this time of year. The Jeep or lifted truck could, but it's crazy. So we were walking from one trailer job to another, and there it is, a giant size 16 footprint in the snowy mud on the side of this gradual embankment. It was super exciting, and I called everyone around to check it out. We were all staring at it, and as soon as I said, "Let's get a phone," my youngest at the time, Corbin, looked up at us, smiled, and erased it with his boot. He didn't realize what he was doing. Bummer, no pic, but it was really cool. And in this area, there are trees that are crossed like the Bigfoot show, super high in the air. It doesn't look natural, and we used to comment on it before we saw the footprint. This is the same area where Wendy set that baby deer's hip in the second chapter. Excuse me. After that excitement, we were delighted to see that the little trailer had the roof built around it, flush or as tight as can be. You see, the roof had to stay and the trailer had to go to make the deal. What a crazy sort of fun winching adventure. First it was a tire pump and find adventure, then winching fun. At the time we had a smaller winch on the Jeep, only 5,000 pounds. It was the wire kind, and the way it was, there was also pine trees in front of the trailer. So I used the pine tree as pulleys for the winch to pull an inch this way, an inch that way until it was out. It took hours, and when it was done, I accidentally sawed one of the trees in half, and then the other one sort of half pulled out of the ground. I'm sure they both lived, maybe a bit crooked. The buyer was happy it all worked out. Heading down the hill almost sent us over the edge many times as we went the long way around. The trailer was really too heavy for the Jeep. We had to use the e-brake, and it was freaky not to be able to stop and having a corner with a cliff 30 feet ahead. We went slow and figured it out after a few scary moments. We closed that deal. We closed a lot of deals up there, all land except one that was really cool with a spring and a cabin on it and a large gold mine. That gold mine was actually the hurdle to selling it, both of the times that it sold. It was a large mine with large entrance that was silted over. The original mining tracks headed out of the mine all the way down them, about 6 to 19 switchbacks, ox cart from there. It was historically cool, but when we first found out that it wasn't history, just a bit different. The neighbor actually held the mining claims on parcels attached to his, and he actually mined the tunnels. He was a real character, and he would maintain the 19 switchbacks with a 1909 year bulldozer. He was always asking neighbors to help him with the road every year, mainly because he needed a hand to operate the pulley for the bulldozer's front blade. You had to stand there. It was a trip of a machine because it still ran, and instead of hydraulics, it had a chain and pulley. Old Lean owned all the gold rights, so selling the property was a bit difficult because it was selling a mine that you couldn't mine, and actually someone else had the right to the gold and the right to prospect for it. That's a tough disclosure to get around. We did it twice on that property. Oh, let me show you the pictures. These are great pictures. These are nice here. There's that trailer stuck up in there, and I'm winching it out right here. Woohoo! There's my beautiful lady at the top of the mountain. There's me standing. See that trailer? That is crazy how we did that, right? One of my favorite places on earth. I currently have 2 listings up there. I got a beautiful cabin on 6 acres. And I also have a raw, picture perfect 5 acres. Right up at 7,000 feet. You can check that out at www.sacredmountainproperties.com if you're into that sort of thing. I'd love to sell it really soon. I'm probably going up there tomorrow, I hope. That'd be cool. So, here we go. Oh, gotta turn a page. Excuse me. This is wild. Okay, there was a murder manhunt up there. Can you remember back in the Obama days, there was these government operation called Jade Helm? I can remember people on the mountain talking about it, where back east the military was basically invading towns as practice at taking people's guns and not giving them back. It was a real shocker to hear that Jade Helm hit Caliente. Caliente is our city name. It means hot. And it's really not that hot there. We're in the mountains, so I don't understand that part of it. That's all ad lib, sorry. Wendy had a friend say that on the way up the canyon there were Humvees with 50 caliber machine guns and troops. The word was they were in the area to map the top of the Paiute Mountains, and there was no maps of all the roads and trails. That was not true. I had a detailed map hanging in my office. It was just real old. The military was not too visible during this time. Now we move on to the murder. While this military operation was going on, there was an ex-military homeless guy who wandered up the mountain. It's very rare to see anyone walking up there. One person we know in the basin said he asked if they had any food. He then headed to Twin Oaks, where he broke into a cabin at the end of the road off a little creek. I'm sure this guy figured no one would show up to the cabin. It was really remote and behind multiple gates. The story around was the 2 teenagers showed up at the cabin and the guy pulled a gun on them. They convinced him to just take their off-road Razor and leave. He did, and happened to head right up the top of the Paiutes. On Paiute Peak, there was this dentist that retired up there with a lot of land. We met him a couple times, and he would patrol the mountain and ask who you were and what you were doing up there. It's always nice to be in real estate for that reason. Unfortunately, these 2 did come along each other, and the dentist was killed. At that point, the Jade Helm operation, right in the same area, became a federal manhunt. Isn't that interesting? This lasted for over 2 weeks. We knew a gal who had a Black Hawk helicopter land in her front pasture. She thought it was real cool and got a picture with the guys. The mountain community is interesting that way. That's why it's shocking that this guy was able to do this. Most of the old ladies up there are tougher than cops. However, this guy was like Rambo, no joking. He was breaking into cabins to survive. It's 7,000 feet on Paiute Peak and filled with bears, lions, and hunters. This guy must be in his element as he was trained a manhunter. We heard that the cops or SWAT stormed 2 different cabins that he was in. I heard he shot them all in the legs and walked out. That's hearsay. However, the federal manhunt never got him. He was apparently shot by Kern County sheriffs in Ridgecrest out of the desert on the other side of the mountain. Later, we got confirmation that he was a recent ex-Special Forces. Isn't that interesting with Jade Helm going on right there, right? In law school, they teach you the basic principle of the duck theory of law. If it looks like a duck, acts like a duck, then it's a duck. wah, wah, right? This was all way too coincidental to both me and Wendy. However, most in the community really didn't put the two operations together until we brought it up. We had a client buy a place, and while meditating atop a boulder, he had a large mountain lion walk by him. Actually, the way he described it is a large cat circled and rubbed against the rock he was on. What a cool experience, right? I'm sure it only happened because he was calm and meditating. I wonder how hard it is to stay calm. Would we see deer every trip and black bear very frequently? The cabins up there are all unpermitted and all have bear or shelters for bears. Bars or shelters for bears. Hunters got to ask themselves, are they hunting or being hunted? That reminds me of the one funniest trip to Indoor. That's what we call the top of the mountain. My kid's name Indoor. That's cuter, no. We pulled up this very special parcel with the mountain lion. But this is a couple years earlier, and this couple totally startled us. They came out of the bushes dressed in full camo army style. But it was a bit shocking because they were Vietnamese. You could tell it was Vietnam because of the wife. She was trailing her husband, who was brandishing a .22, and she had a string of squirrels around her neck. I can imagine we looked pretty odd too, as all of our mouths were obviously dropped open. We didn't know what to say. The man greeted us, and we just watched as they walked by. After, both Wendy and I had a real laugh over the man's true intentions. Was it the Vietnamese delicacy of squirrel meat, or was it he trying to kill his wife? He might as well have hung a T-bone around her neck and sent her into a bear den. I wonder if they made it off the mountain for 3 reasons. They were Vietnamese in camo hiking on private ranches with a .22. Bing! There's one. Second reason, a .22 won't stop a black bear. There's number 2 there. Third, they had bait around the lady's neck. That's the trifecta, so who knows? They were nice people, though. Indoor is one of the most magical places, filled with life, death, and the beauty of real nature. One last picture for you. And that was old Howard's Gate up at the top of the mountain there. We made out of a tree that fell down. And that ends that chapter. Catch you on the next one.